Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be talking about two important stories. The first is with reference to what is going on in India in terms of silencing any voice that goes out to challenge the decisions taken by the BJP government and its leadership, and of course the kind of actions that have been taken unilaterally in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the kinds of human rights abuses that take place not just in Kashmir but in other parts of the territory as well. We've known that since then we have seen a backlash in terms of the way that voices have been raised against what is going on. However, those voices have been suppressed on various platforms and they've been talked against. They've been actively blocked and various social media platforms have been pursued in terms of going ahead and blocking content that is against the Modi regime, against any actions that the BJP government wants to take, and of course anything that points out what is going on against the Muslims within India and also other minorities. We've seen recent blockage of Twitter accounts of various journalists as well, not just those based in India but outside as well, who have been vocal about what is going on. And now we've also seen that a short film has also been banned on YouTube that was earlier released on the 12th of May. It's an award-winning short documentary on what is going on in Kashmir titled Anthem for Kashmir. And it talks about and highlights the enforced disappearances and fake encounters that have been going on in India for quite some time now. However, keeping in line with what the Modi regime has been doing in the past with regard to such content, it has been blocked. A request has been given, a legal request been given to YouTube, who has blocked this content in India. So we're going to talk about that in further detail and try to understand what actions are required in terms of dealing with these issues, and then of course the accountability of social media platforms such as YouTube and Twitter as well, which has also filed a judicial review against some of the requests that have been made in terms of blocking of content, calling them disproportionate. So we're going to take a look at that as well. In our second segment of the show today, we're going to take a look at the campaigns and rallies that are of course in place ahead of the polls, the Punjab by-polls that are scheduled to be held on the 17th of this month. We've also seen that the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has released an extensive schedule of rallies, and he has also spoken out once again against the current institutions of the government, calling them imported, and still talking about the US conspiracy that he had earlier mentioned as being the reason of his ouster. And he's also threatened to reveal everything what he says is in terms of relevant in terms of the characters that have been involved in this, and said that he's not doing so out of national interest, and if elections are taken place, then it is going to be up to the public to decide the matter and they will choose for Peter. Of course, that remains to be seen, but he seems confident of the matter. And he talks about, of course, various institutions who have repeatedly denied the alleged conspiracy, including the US as well. So we'll take a look at what is going on in terms of the political uncertainty within Pakistan ahead of the Punjab by-polls. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studios by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment, we've been joined by a Hollywood film producer, Mr. Habib Baracha. Thank you very much, Mr. Habib, for joining us and being a part of the debate. I'll start with you, Mr. Habib. When we look at the situation in India and the kind of voices that have been shunned and that are trying to be silenced, of course, it points out to the overall freedoms that should exist in terms of creative expression, in terms of journalistic expression, and of course other forms which are important in terms of vocalizing what is really going on. I'd like to first of all understand the medium of film and how powerful it is in terms of its impact of highlighting various issues. We understand that this short documentary has been banned, has been blocked by YouTube within India, but of course this has more consequences in terms of the way that this is not going to be seen or viewed by the masses within India, and the impact that it has. There's one, of course, the freedom of creative expression, but there's also the impact it's going to have on the real struggles of the people.
Well, thank you first of all for having me. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Film is probably the most important medium in this day and age, given that everyone has a smartphone in their hand, or most of the population of the planet has a smartphone, and they have the ability to access videos, at the spur of a second. The fact that India is resorting to such tactics, quite frankly, I find shocking. I did get a chance to see this video, and frankly, I don't find anything in it that is highlighting or like targeting their security agencies or anything like that, that they should feel so intimidated or threatened by it that they need to ban creative expression of this sort, where no one has been named, no one has been, you know, highlighted. In fact, frankly, to me, it goes to show how scared, for the lack of a better word, the Modi government and the Modi regime seems to be from such expressive behaviors. Because, there's a very old saying that you are known by the enemies you keep. And if someone making a short thing and putting it on YouTube is intimidating the Indian government that much that they need to ban it, frankly, I mean, it just goes to show that, wow, you guys are weak.
I understand that, but then there's of course also the responsibility of various social media platforms that exist, including YouTube and Twitter. And I also understand that they are of course bound by the legal obligations that they have in their host countries. But when we talk about such content which has a direct impact on a very real struggle of Muslims and of other populations as well, or any sort of injustice that exists, and if you're creating content that can actually impact the way people perceive it or understand the situation, then doesn't that sort of accountability extend to the social media platforms as well?
It does. I mean, look, the thing is that there's a fine line, right? And that needs to be defined very clearly. It can't be moving around, on a project by project basis when you're talking about setting the parameters. And generally the platforms are pretty good when it comes to it. Obviously, they have to respect any government's request for intervention or removal of content, because they are confined or bound by the laws of that particular territory. But I think the onus of this falls more on the countries themselves and their media regulators to come up with and define things. Frankly, in this particular instance, I mean, these aren't even, Kashmiri producers, directors, writers, or even actors. They're all uh, Indians, and a lot of them I did look through at the request. I mean, someone asked me, so I did look through, and I noticed that a lot of them had Hindu names. So
Yeah,
it goes
they
to
do.
show to me that this is being created primarily on the basis of humanity. It's not necessarily just to highlight, by a particular segment of society what is going on, but it's more about humanity. And
Right.
India, which claims to be the largest democracy in the world and talks always about secularism and all, I just don't get it. I find it,
Right.
bizarre
Right,
that.
and that is a very good point, Mr. Paracha. Let us talk about the spirit of professional community. We have seen that this drip of censorship in India continues. We have seen that when a human rights worker is arrested, UN speaks out. Then if a journalist is apprehended, then journalists actually speak out all over the world. But we haven't seen the way film medium has been censored in India and the way it has been honed, particularly a recent documentary showing the plight of Hindus in Kashmir. No reaction comes from international community of filmmakers. Why would that be?
So I think, look, there's also a problem that there's just so much content. I can give you an example myself. If I wanted to see even 10% of the total content that's coming out, it's just not enough hours in a day to do so. So a lot of times it comes down to recommendations, what's trending, and things like that before you end up even becoming aware of something. And a lot of times, like for example, let's take Netflix in Pakistan. Often I'll see, whatever the trending shows are, and then first pick is going to be out of them to see, hey, do I want to see one of these that others are watching?
Yeah.
And there are obviously algorithms behind that as well, which all the platforms also utilize based on your search history, your previous things that you watched and stuff. So sometimes it's not a matter of not wanting to talk about it. It's just that in journalism, it's very in your face, right? You're aware of it immediately because the community that writes, there's periodicals or newspapers, and it becomes highlighted very quickly.
Right.
With film, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. It takes a
Right.
long time.
Regarding the perception or knowledge about what is going on in India, I've actually spoken to a lot of my journalist friends who are based in the West. They are pretty aware of what is going on, and usually they try to hint at that as well whenever they're working. But is the Hollywood or Western film industry even aware of what is going on in India?
I think to a degree they are. There's a very high penetration of India has the largest film industry. As you know, Netflix has their office there. Amazon has its own productions going on from there. It does become more difficult when you have a economic relationship. And I mean, this is something I have a business background besides film as well, and I can tell you that when you build trade relationships and economic relations, it becomes harder to question every single thing. And another great example of that is look at the potential decoupling between the United States and China. Like, despite the United States calling China its number one national security threat on television, they just can't just pick up and leave. They can't do it because those trade links are so intertwined and so deeply rooted that it can't just be done. So India benefits from similar things because there's a lot of things where India has over the last span of 2 decades or so developed that kind of value or perceived value at least to the rest of the world, especially in IT, for example. So, and I think the Indian government does take advantage of that to push their own narratives as much as they can and get away with a lot, which maybe a country like Pakistan, frankly, could not. Not that we are doing anything wrong, but it's just that India and their government is pushing in or piggybacking on those relationships, which sometimes are not so easy to break.
And Habib, if I could, could contribute in whatever you were saying, if we look at a such pattern from India, I mean, in recent times, especially since Modi took the office, the premier office, we have been constantly seeing in the Bollywood that the movies they were coming up with, there were many movies that were anti-Muslim, and of course the sentiments they wanted to create, they wanted to distort the historic perspectives. They wanted to they wanted their people to know that the that the previous Muslim dynasties, they were the barbarians, and that is why we are here today, and that is why we have to have Mahabharat for us, rather than thinking about how good a few of the Muslim rulers were in the past. And we know that there were certain movies, I mean, even throughout the Muslim world, it was highlighted, and especially few of the Turk leaders of the past who conquered India, few of the Afghan leaders who conquered India, they were diminished with the distorted facts. And if we right now, if we look at there is another movie, the Kashmir Files. Of course,
what I was talking about.
Of course, it serves the purpose of India, today's India, and it gets aired everywhere. But when somebody comes up, obviously, with the Anthem for Kashmir, and in Anthem for Kashmir, they are the ones who bring in the true facts of what happened in post 370 and 35A abrogation. And of course, they were the ones who were trying to highlight in them 10 minutes. I saw that they tried to highlight that abrogation of 370 and 35A, it led to something which shouldn't have happened. And of course, no media was allowed there, and the only way they could tell the world was through this 10-minute video. And now when we see that if we talk about the Kashmir Files, nobody comes forward against that, not even Twitter, not even by YouTube or elsewhere, nobody comes against that. But when it comes to this 10-minute video, the one which is highlighting the plight the Kashmiris went through after 2019, I mean, I wonder why. I just keep on thinking about this fact that fair enough, India has its Information Technology Act 2000, and they keep on blaming everyone for going against it. But to me, I think if Twitter, if YouTube, all of them, they keep on listening to Indians, why can't they get the other perspective?
Yeah.
Get the
Let
other
me-
perspective. And I can understand that all of these YouTube, Twitter, they outsource their research as well from different organizations, and of course they have nothing to do with any of the country's policies. But nothing happens. Nothing happens. And
Right.
I don't know why.
With your permission, Faisal,
Yeah.
let me actually put it in a question form as well. Paraja Saab, since he was actually talking about it, I was just wondering, 1.3 billion people is not a small number. And India is very proudly, it claims that it is a very diverse country. But suddenly, all of the people seem to have gone flat. I mean, Bollywood is also producing the same one-dimensional content.
Yeah.
And similarly, when you talk about journalists, when you talk about intellectuals, public intellectuals, and politicians, they seem to be moving in the same direction. Your business is creative business, right? So perhaps you can tell us what actually leads to this flatness of public mind.
And let me just also pile on that. When we talk about the characterization, of course, of different cultures, of different people, as Faisal was earlier mentioning, then we have seen that perhaps across different films and other forms of media, for example, racist slurs are something that everybody is against and nobody sees them as welcome. But an outright characterization or distortion of someone's culture or identity, that still continues and that portrays a completely different image. Is there any way that we have any ethical guidelines that are universal in this sense?
Okay, so I'll try and answer the first part first, and then
Go
move
ahead.
on to with regards to the type of content and society as such going quiet. I think it's not a secret how regressive the Modi regime has been in terms of silencing the voice of dissent in any shape or form. Businesses are being shut. People are made to disappear, not only in Kashmir but in other parts of India as well. A country that was on a very progressive path, I feel, and in some ways we as Pakistanis would even look up to certain elements within the Indian society in terms of their secularism and the way they used to be with their minorities. All that's gone down the drain with one government and one individual, for that matter, who's taken it upon himself to kind of have this thing out of history about this great country, which, quite frankly, I mean, I don't get it. It's like, you want to be great. How about starting today with the people you have in your country and creating a better environment for the ones who are living, rather than thinking about what you were 300 years ago and how it was and how it wasn't and how it should be. I mean, do what is needed for the people who are your citizens. They're all equal citizens. I don't know where in the Indian constitution it says, Kiji, if you're a Hindu, you're a higher citizen, and if you're a Muslim, you're not, or if you're, some other part, because like even if you take the region of the northeast of India, the region normally called the Seven Sisters, why are they so unhappy? They're not even Muslim. There's a lot of issues, and a lot of these issues, while sure, it's a very diverse country, a lot of these issues would be there in like any country, even if you take the United States, or we hear about other large countries as well. But the thing is that the job of the government should be to try and mitigate those issues, not inflare them and not build up on them to the point that people are just taking the law into their hand. Modi, unfortunately, his track record speaks for itself. I mean, this is the guy who was banned, wasn't even given a visa by the United States, and was considered, until he became the prime minister, his visa was not even being renewed. And these are all publicly shared, this is public information. So I'm not, I think when it comes to the people do want, and I have some Indian friends from university, I can tell you, they're not happy. But at the same time, they say, look, what can we do? The problem is that you have a massive population in India, like you said, 1.3 plus billion, who are being fed this nonsense about, and utilizing religion primarily as a piggybacking on religion, and forgetting the very basics of religion, which is humanity. Even if you take Islam, for example, the basis of Islam is about humanity, being a good human being, right? In all religions, even the Abrahamic ones and the other ones, they primarily talk about being a good human being, having good values. So they've taken that out, and they've gone only to the kind of the functioning of that religion in terms of the practices. And on that basis, they're dividing and rule. It happens everywhere. I mean, I think it happens in our country as well, but this man has taken it to an extreme, and sadly, the people are falling for it. So your
No,
intellectual...
I get that. But it kind of reminds me of what L.K. Advani actually said about Indian emergency, that was 77 onwards, that media was asked to bend, they chose to crawl. So there seems to be this attitude of subservience as well. But my concern is that what is happening in India, if it were to happen in Europe or for that matter America in this day and age, you would have seen too many people pushing back. Even now when there's this abortion rights issue and race issue, there too you see a lot of people, good people actually standing up and pushing back. It doesn't seem to be happening in India right now. There seems to be this silence or flatness, or frankly, we can attribute a lot to Modi, but even before Modi, we saw what Congress was doing regarding Kashmir. Yeah. There seems to be a collective consciousness in India that seems to go silent or numb or blind when it comes to Kashmir, especially after 2000, this recent Article 370 and Article 335A. We have seen what kind of messages were coming from Congress or other political parties. Same authoritarian kind of language.
Sure. You see, look, that's the problem. When you politicize a matter by adding religion to it, even if someone wants to say that this is wrong, it becomes a little difficult to do because, you've put religion into it, and then people are going to start questioning. One, obviously, there's the element for any country of traitor. Then there is a religious, are you against our religion, etc. In their case, Hinduism. But I think, why a country or a political party or a politician, why they do that, the underlying psychological reason to it is insecurity. You see, an intellectual person, a smart person, is never scared of an intellectual debate.
Right.
Okay? Why would you be scared? You want to hear the other's opinion. If your genuine objective is to govern, which is what all these politicians basically, end of the day, they come in for, then you should be willing to take the criticism. And if you can't take it, step aside, because you're there to serve the people, not rule over them. But the problem is that the insecure individuals, specifically politicians in India, and who we're talking about, or political parties, they're so insecure that they can't take that because, it requires an intellect at the other end to be able to answer that with the right kind of answer and mitigate whatever the apprehension is. They're not capable of doing that.
Right,
So
and that's a good point. Well, I'll come to you, Faisal. I just want to also tell our viewers that we've been showing the link of the anthem for Kashmir on your screens, and so you can go ahead and watch it. It's sort of been blocked in India only, so it's accessible to people in Pakistan and elsewhere as well.
And in India, you can use a VPN to watch it.
Absolutely, your best friend. So you can also do that and go ahead and take a look at this because it's impactful and it's relevant and it's important for you to understand what today's Kashmir is actually going through. Yes, Faisal, you had a question?
Yeah, first of all, I would recommend that next time we should be showing a list of working VPNs in India so that people can go and watch.
No, Indians know what to use.
Yes.
Yeah, they are smart.
Yeah.
See that Habib, I had a similar question. If we talk about human rights, it's a basic human right to right to information is considered as a basic human right in today's world. And if we talk about India, I am pretty much sure that if not the total population of India disagrees with it, then obviously there will be a large number of Indians who would agree with it and who would want to watch this movie, and several others that are being banned. And by the way, Habib, I've been banned in India as well.
Recently.
Very recently. And very recently because I was sent an email by Twitter saying that my content is very sensitive for Indians. I wonder what sensitivity I had in my tweets, but I was banned in India. And I keep on wondering that if we if we talk about India, today's India, the India that claims that it is so-called a secular state, why world is so quiet on this that they are not providing their population with a basic right to know something, right to information?
And do you see any correction possible in the coming days as well?
Well, I think a lot of it depends. There's a lot of issues in the world right now. So it's also a matter, as far as the world is concerned, of prioritizing things, right? Uh, I think Pakistan was doing a very good job of highlighting a lot of the issues, especially at the UN, where I feel personally, could have done a little bit more is, by hosting certain, at our embassies, maybe events, maybe some more going on to other, other countries' televisions, having talk shows there, which, could be talking about some of the atrocities that are going on in Kashmir. Uh, because the Foreign Office can do a certain element, but there's also an element that needs to be done by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which is, I guess, your guys, PTV's, the ministry that it falls under. And it's everyone has to play their part. So, I mean, with so many other things, it's like, look, for example, take the example of Yemen. There's a lot of things happening over there. It just doesn't make it to the news because there's so many things that the information overload for the average person in public is so much that, and the news cycle is such 24, 48 hours primarily, unless it's a recurring news story, it's kind of done. So, you have to figure out ways to keep it in the people's public opinion high on it, keeping it in as current news. And India is very, very good at covering that because, they have a very, very strong industry, film industry. I mean, frankly, in numbers, India's film industry is bigger than Hollywood. So, they have that very big advantage, and we are having to, as Pakistan, compete with that. I can tell you from my perspective, that I been here and I've been trying, and it's very difficult to make those inroads for Pakistani content even, or Pakistani narratives into places like Hollywood, because India's been at it for the last 30 plus years, and it's been
Right. Mr. Paracha, when we talk about all of these issues, I understand what you're saying in terms of being able to keep on highlighting the issues and, of course, bringing them at the forefront, since they have a shelf life which is very small. But when we take a look at the kind of content creators that exist, not just filmmakers or film producers, but then also content creators on different media platforms, social media platforms, and other forms of creative expressions that exist, don't you think that they perhaps have the capacity or the resources available at hand to keep on producing such content again and again, rather than individuals in general who can perhaps reshare the content, or in terms of even ministries and their workings, so they'll go through a certain procedure of actually going about and doing things? Don't you think that people who are actively actually producing content can have a commitment towards highlighting issues and injustices around the world? Is there even an inclination of making more content that is journalistic in its nature?
And to spread the message, what do you recommend? Disruption or lobbying?
I think you need in this day and age, disruption tends to work in reverse. So lobbying is the way to go. And that lobbying can be through films, it can be through, just like what India did. Look, India knows very, very well what they're doing in Kashmir is wrong. There's a reason why the Indian government funded Kashmir Files. However they did it, whoever they did it through, whoever they hired for it, why was there a need to do that? Because deep inside, as human beings, they're aware that what they're doing is just goes against every single decent thing that you can do to another human being. Forget the fact that it's Kashmir or, this is Indians doing it and religion or anything. The fact is what you're doing is just very, very wrong. And it's their own guilt that's eating at them. So they're trying to cover it by making or paying for content like this to show the world, oh look, it's not actually the way you guys are seeing it. Otherwise, why would India fund it? So, lobbying works, and that lobbying needs to be done through mediums like film, through songs, through, like I said, the talk shows. Talk shows are great because that you're getting directly into people's houses, into their minds. Look, everything that you know as a human being is a subset of what you hear and what you see. Since the day you
Right.
were born,
Habib,
Mr. Paraja, I also want to understand one thing. When we talk about the blocking of content, of course, as we've discussed earlier, there is, of course, a lot of other avenues that exist in terms of getting access to content, and it's common knowledge to most people that there exists one. How much of an impact there is there even in this act of blocking content in a particular region or country, since of course it's accessible to other parts of the world, it may be accessible through other means within India as well, and there are other channels that are still talking about what's going on in Kashmir. Is this not actually more counterproductive in its effect than actually getting the impact that the agencies or the Indian government wants?
I completely agree. I think that, in fact, when you block something, you have to pick your battles. So, and although this is kind of might even go to in favor of India, but, picking something like this and blocking it, you're actually going to give it more promotion. So you have to know what to block, when to block, why to block it. And it is counterproductive because it gets highlighted. So would we in Pakistan know about it, or would I, frankly, like I said, there's so much content, have known about it? Probably not. But the fact that the Indian government decided to ban it makes me want to see it. And so thank you, India, because now, this content is going to be seen by, half of Pakistan and other places as well.
yeah, rest of the world.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the
Habib,
problem is that India goes for brute force. It goes for blocking hundreds or thousands of accounts, right?
Look, the best example of that is the United States.
Yeah.
They show often in their movies, they're burning or blowing up their own White House, their Capitol building, whatnot. They don't ban that content, right? They laugh it off. They know it's fiction. And what they work on is then they sensationalize it so much that even in the occasion that something real comes in, that also passes through the cracks in the sense that it doesn't have that impact. So again, it comes down to feeling secure in your own skin and in your own nation and in the ability of your own people, which clearly India does not have, despite having the largest film industry in the world, because they need to resort to such archaic and basic tactics like ban kar do.
Right.
exactly. Habib, earlier you were talking about the lobbying, and it reminded me of last time when we had a coffee together when you were in Islamabad last time, and we did talk about lobbying as well, how we lack in lobbying, especially in a city like New York or Washington, where we should be, clawing up on all of the lobbying tones, but we are not doing it. Do you think that, as you have earlier mentioned, that through films and songs and different content programs we can lobby, but of course all of this, it comes through a state level. Do you think that our state is ready for that, and if so, then do they have right people to do it?
And by the way, do we also have money? Because India is very rich and it can burn money as well. Can we?
So money is a very big problem. Definitely is. When you're talking about things like this, it does cost a lot of money, frankly, because you'll have to compete with the rest of the world for that airtime or that space. It's not, your local channels. You're talking about trying to get space on some of the biggest platforms or, media houses, etc. in the world, where all the 197 countries are trying to do the same thing for their own agendas and image building, etc. So money is definitely an aspect, but there are ways to come up with a plan to mitigate that over basically make an organized plan and reach it. It might take 2 to 3 years to get there, maybe even up to 5, but it can be done. Do we have the people? I think we have people, wherever we are lacking, Dubai is a great example. If you looked at how one guy with a vision transformed a little bitty desert fishing village into one of the most modern cities in the world. So they didn't have the money, but they had the vision and they had the ability to go out and get the best people to achieve that goal. So you have to figure out first and all what your goal is and then set out for that goal. And that goal can't be determined by Habib doing it or Raja Faisal doing it. It has to be the best person for it, whether that's Pakistani or not. If that person achieves what you want, that's what you want, right?
Right.
So go
Right.
ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Habib Paracha, for
Thank
joining
you,
us
Habib.
and being a part of the debate. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Let me just remind our viewers once again that you can see the link online on our screens as well. And actually just go to YouTube and search for Anthem for Kashmir and you'll be able to see this short documentary. And it's going to be wonderful if you do, because it's important for us to understand the situation and perhaps the impact will be different. So go ahead and watch that. We're going to be now talking about the situation that is existing on the political scenario within Pakistan, the Punjab by-polls that are due to be held on the 17th of July, and then of course the kind of statements that keep on coming in from the PTI leadership. Farrukh, we've seen in the past this is obviously something that the former Prime Minister had been talking about since his ouster and claiming that to be the reason, the alleged conspiracy. And he's also now threatened to reveal perhaps even more secrets that he thinks exist. Again, this is causing an uncertainty in an already polarized environment that we see. And now that the polls are coming up, how do you see the particular role of PTI's leadership with regards to their responsibility in terms of ensuring, and they claim that they're keeping this fact behind the screens just because it is not good for the nation. So are they even actually benefiting the country by making such statements?
I don't think so. And, you know, if that ship has actually sailed, when we started talking about a conspiracy that did not exist, he actually created kind of atmospherics which was going to seriously damage Pakistan's interest. And yesterday, I don't know whether you have seen it, some of Pakistani journalists based in US were especially pointing it out on the national media that whatever it is, this conspiracy talk is damaging Pakistan and communities' interest in the US. That is a serious concern. Perhaps our leaders from across the divide can actually pay some heed to that. But regarding what is happening and the kind of statements that you highlighted, it seems to be a kind of dance. You know, the former Prime Minister is responding to certain new developments, right? In the past, when the previous Chief Minister of Punjab was being removed, by the very same gentleman, by the very same Prime Minister, he was asked to tender resignation, right? And then the new candidate was told that that resignation has been accepted. Then that former Chief Minister actually goes on media and says that I have so many secrets in my chest. If I write a book, it is going to be a bestseller. Within 24 hours, the new candidate was told that once we have succeeded in staying at the center, then we will remove him, right? Even now, there was a leak. There was an audio leak, right? A purported audio leak that was linked to his own family, his own staff. So then he is responding to that. So when I look at it, I see it as a message that if you are going to do this thing, I've got stuff as well, right? So in a way, I think at this moment, this kind of competition of arguments will continue on national media. He will keep on coming up with counter accusations, sometimes accusations, and the other side will also be responding. But in the end, it all depends on the people on the streets in Punjab, whether they want to vote, whether they want to agitate. I haven't seen evidence that there is going to be a humongous agitation anywhere in Punjab, the kind that is organic and that is spontaneous. That hasn't happened, right? It perhaps happened on the day when Imran Khan was removed from power, and the next day he made a call and people came out. After that, I haven't seen anything of the similar level. So at this moment, it ends up being an issue of ballot box, and we are going to see on 17th who's going to win. When they win, they will form the government, whosoever it is. It can be the incumbent, it can be opposition, or a third party.
Right. Do you think that people are even buying these statements? Because we've been hearing these a lot over the years, not just now, but even in the past. Things like having stuff on somebody else or keeping some dirt and not being able to get access to that information and supposedly creating a sort of mystery that is only known to certain people. Is that something that the people are buying now?
Right, and that is a very good question. I tell you, there's a problem here. In the US, whenever, or in the West, or major democracies, whenever something happens or something is said, the pollsters immediately go to the people they are polling and they get numbers. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we don't seem to have developed that mechanism that automatically you get the kind of opinion or that kind of reaction. When I don't have that big a sample, of course, I can't meet more than 100 people or a few hundred people per day.
Sure.
But when I go out, it's mixed. There are people who actually want to buy it. Then there are people who don't buy it at all, and then there is a third tier as well who think that it is something which is artificial, but still, because their guy is out of power, they think that he is doing the right thing in actually using all the mechanisms, all the techniques he has got to fight the chaos.
Right. Faisal, do you think that all the mechanisms or all techniques and all kinds of narratives are actually justified when it comes to political campaigns? Can political parties just go ahead and talk about whatever narrative sells?
If we look at the history of the electoral history of Pakistan, the politics has always been like this. We know that there were parties always who had one notion, and that was that anti-West, if they are going to elections, they will always go for anti-West because it sells. It used to sell. Now, of course, in the cities it doesn't sell anymore, but it used to sell at that time. Right now, of course, there is a vote bank that believes.
Faisal, but that is not the question.
Yeah.
The question is whether it is right or wrong to do it.
Yeah.
It is wrong. It is wrong. Why I say this? Because the essence of democracy should be the problems of people, how the nation progresses, and a person who's sitting out there, waiting for his turn to vote, he should only be having one goal in his mind with his vote, and that is that he wants the country and the nation to progress. Yeah. And earlier,
there's no dearth of issues in that regard.
Exactly.
So why not focus on that? Inflation is there, poverty, unemployment, and so many other things.
Farrukh, very frankly, America is a very important country for Pakistan. America is very important country for Pakistan, and going all out against it, I think it doesn't make any sense. And Sana, you were earlier asking, and obviously Farrukh mentioned that about the secrets. To me, I think only 3 of us, we don't have any secrets to hide or share, including
don't
tempt the fate.
Including
I don't want to take that.
Including our producer Wahid Salara. It seems like every Pakistani is having some kind of secrets, and somewhere down the line he is ready to burst it out.
Yeah, but Sana, let us turn the tables, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, when you listen to the former Prime Minister, this is a unilinear narrative, and that is there. But do you buy any of it?
I didn't ask you a personal question, but if you're going to ask me a personal question...
Opinion. Your opinion. Yeah,
My personal opinion, whether or not
we all are in opinion business, right? You will ask me, what do I think? I will give you a straight answer, won't I?
Well, that remains to be seen.
It is not personal.
I'll ask you a straight
television.
Let me just actually come to the answers. I don't want the impression to go that I'm diverting the question, which I'm not. So I just like to talk about that. When we talk about any sort of issue and whether or not you actually believe in it, it comes down for me personally to the credibility and to the past examples that have been set. And if your credibility has been lost once, twice, on numerous occasions, then perhaps the credibility of any statement you make in the future is also lost. Yes,
right. Yeah, Sana, what I wanted to say is, this kind of, when these kind of statements, they come from the leader figures of Pakistan, what I believe, I believe the West and the rest of the country, rest of the world, it would be, you know, taking us very non-seriously. They would be considering us very non-serious nation. As a nation, we need to grow up maybe.
Yeah,
Yes,
but should I also answer that, try to answer that question that I asked you?
It's up to
earlier?
you. I didn't ask you that
No,
question, but you can answer
I'm
it
seeking
if you
your
want.
permission, ma'am.
Go ahead.
You are the controller of the program.
Go ahead.
The moderator.
Yes,
Right.
I know.
But frankly, I think I have a lot of sympathy for the former Prime Minister. I think he has done many good things as well. But I think whosoever asked him or suggested that he should actually take this path of highlighting or talking about a conspiracy. You know, these ciphers, these diplomatic communications come from all countries, and there can be very harsh words exchanged at times, but that doesn't amount to a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So whosoever actually asked him to go in this direction was not doing him any service.
Yeah.
I think it has damaged his stock, because then it seems that perhaps you are not actually equipped enough to take care of the national interest internationally, right?
Right.
And this whole, idea of honor-based foreign policy, right? That amounts to a tribal kind of culture.
Yeah.
We are not living in a tribal world. We are living in a world where we have to fight for our national interest, whatever that might be. I mean, there are moments when you have to take blows when you shouldn't, but you have to, because you are standing up for your nation, not for yourself, right? So that bothers me.
Absolutely. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, but we'll keep talking about the Punjab by polls and, of course, the political scenario of the country in later shows as well. That's all we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.